What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. This is episode 6. For this one, I actually decided to take a break at my local gym here, which is also my personal garage. Quick tip, if you have a 2-car garage and you want to turn it into a gym, highly recommend. Best investment I've ever made. Anyone that knows me knows that as a recently single guy, the only real things I do with my life are work out, and play poker. So those things are gonna cross paths every now and then. And for this episode, we are back at the Aria, playing some 1-3 again. This, I believe, has the most interesting hands yet to date. There are some big bluffs, some big calls, and some big laydowns. So really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I was a little nervous to put it out there. I think you're gonna see why at the very end. Please let me know what you think. Without further ado, I got another set to hit, so let's get into the hands.
We start off the session with $300, that's the max. In the first interesting hand, I raise it to $12 on the button with King Jack off. Only the cutoff calls. The cutoff and I have been seated next to one another a few times so far on this Vegas trip and become friendly. He calls, saying, only because it's you. We're heads up to a flop of Ace 3-6. He checks. I see bet to 15, and he makes the call. The turn is the 10 of hearts. He checks again. Now normally I'd size up here if we're gonna commit to this bluff line, but I figure even a small bet would get our friend out. I make it $20 now. He calls once more. So, alright, maybe I was wrong. The river is a 7 of diamonds. Now he checks again, and this time I do decide to size up a little bit. I go to $50 on the river. Our friend says, oh boy, I guess I'll pay you off. You're a nice guy, even though I know I'm beat. And he calls. He shows ace deuce and takes it down. Lesson here, don't make friends at the poker table and then try to bluff them. In this one, we're on the big blind and look down at 6-9 off. Not exactly a premium hand, but certainly a fun one, so I've heard. When it folds to the cutoff, he decides to make it $10 to go. The button calls, the small blind calls, and it's only 7 more for me to close the action. We decide to call and see what happens. Well, what happens is the flop comes 9-9 queen, 2 spades. About as good as we can ask for with 6-9 off. It checks to the pre-flop raiser, who continues for $15. Folds to me, and this is where the video picks up. I make the call. The turn comes the jack of hearts. I check and flow. Our opponent continues for $45 now, and with only about $140 left in my stack, I decide to ship it all in. There's 2 flush draws out there, and any 10 is open-ended. When my opponent doesn't snap call, I know he isn't voted up already, so we're ahead. He thinks for a little while, says it's a bad call, but eventually puts it in, and announces the following.
I need an ace.
The only hands I can think of that need an ace in this situation would be aces, as King 10 already has a straight here. Don't really know what else would need an ace unless he has ace 9 and thinks that he's somehow behind. So we're up against aces, which is the best case scenario, as he only has 2 outs rather than having to dodge a straight or flush combo draw until the river is the ace of hearts. That's not good. He tables aces and gets us with a 2-outer. That's the second time on this trip. I had high hopes for 6-9, only to have them crushed out of nowhere. That's not a good time, let me tell you. After the last hand, we've rebought for another $300, and I'll be honest, I'm a little tilted. Tilt is something as a poker player we have to try our best to recognize and mitigate. It's impossible to avoid completely. Anyone who says otherwise is either lying to you or themselves. We just have to do our best to navigate it. A few orbits go by, and I look down at 8 deuce of diamonds, once again in the big blind. It's a limp pot, and I don't expect much action, so I kind of missed filming the beginning of this hand. The flop comes Jack 10 8, 2 diamonds. We have bottom pair and a flush draw. I check, and it checks to the hijack, who makes it 15 to go. I smooth call, and so does middle position. The turn is the 2 of hearts. We somehow now have an incredibly strong hand that will be very sneaky. I check, middle position checks, and the hijack makes it 60 to go. This sizing seems very odd. I'm not sure what he thinks can even call this. It's a pot-sized bet and just seems like a bluff to me, or maybe a bigger diamond draw. We have 2 pair, so I'm obviously never folding, but just calling here seems bad as well. I check how much he has behind, and it's only another 50 or so. Middle position has about the same, so I put them both to the test. I raise it to $120, effectively putting them all in. Middle position snap folds, and the hijack snap calls. The river comes the 9 diamonds. I ask if my opponent has diamonds, he shakes his head, and I table my hand to take it down. Not sure what he snap called us with, possibly a straight draw. He may have even gotten there, based on that river being a 9. With so many good river cards for us, I'm happy with the play, and it worked out. In the next one, we wake up in the small blind with ace queen suited. It limps around to me, and I open to 13. The big blind makes it 50. It folds back around to me, and out of position, I consider 4-bet jamming here. The big blind has a similar stack to mine, a little over 400, but I've been stacked once already and would like to see a flop with this hand. So I make the call. We are heads up to a board of 2 of clubs, ace of diamonds, 5 of hearts. I think for a long time here and eventually decide to check. Our opponent checks back instantly. The turn is now the 7 of clubs. At this point, I'd really like to build a pot, but my opponent 3-bet to a very large size for this game next to act with the whole table behind still to go. I'm a little wary he may have ace-king or even aces, and if he doesn't, then he has kings, queens, jacks, and will likely fold to a bet. For these reasons, I decide to check again, hoping that he makes a bet and I'm willing to call anything that he puts out there. My opponent thinks a little longer this time, but ultimately checks again. The river comes the king of hearts. I immediately regret the way I played this entire hand. Now we've bricked the club draw, and every conceivable hand my opponent could have either beats us or won't put any more money into this pot. For this reason, I once again check, and he once again checks back and says, "You're good." I show my hand and he mucks. He must have had 10s or jacks, and the ace on the flop just kind of froze him. We missed a bet on the turn for sure, but based on his muck, I really don't think he would have called and the results would have ended up the same. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments below. I definitely misplayed it, but I'm not sure exactly what I could have done differently to get any more money into this pot, other than maybe jamming pre. In this hand, we have king, queen off under the gun. I opened it to 12 pre-flop, and we see a call from middle position, the button, and the small blind. The flop comes not too bad. 9-10 jack, rainbow. We have the stone cold nuts here with nothing to be afraid of, and I gotta tell you, it feels pretty damn good. Small blind checks. I decide to get sneaky here and check as well, hoping to entice a bet out of one of the late position players. We get exactly what we asked for when the button bets out for $25. Small blind calls, I call, and middle position folds. The turn brings an absolute blank with the 4 of clubs. Now the small blind takes the lead for 40. There is nothing at all for me to be afraid of on this board, and while I'd like to raise, small blind only has about 100 left in his stack. The button player already has his cards in his hand in a folding motion, and that seems pretty genuine. I don't think he's shooting an angle here. He has already mentally folded. Once the small blind takes the betting lead on the turn, he's either got a bluff or genuinely thinks he has the best hand. I don't want him to fold if he has a bluff, and if he thinks he has the best hand, if we get a clean river, he should do the work for me and just stick it in. For those reasons, I call. The button immediately returns his cards to the dealer, and we're off to a river. This deck should see a doctor because it's shooting blanks when the river comes the 5 of diamonds. Our hopes and dreams come true as the small blind shoves his remaining stack in the middle. I call instantly, and he turns over 2 pair, 10-4 of diamonds. We show our hand and take this one down. This hand I start out in the straddle for $6 and look down at pocket jacks. Waking up in the straddle with a premium like this is waking up to breakfast in bed. What a way to start off a hand. Under the gun, however, hates breakfast and rips his small stack in for $28. Great. Now we won't get any action and have to call off a hand we're likely flipping with or way behind. That is, until under the gun +1 calls. This is the same villain from earlier with the ace-queen hand that checked it all the way down with us. He's been playing relatively snug so far today. It folds around to me, and with jacks here, we are not just calling. I 3-bet and make it $80 to go. Under the gun +1 thinks for a bit, doesn't look happy, but does eventually put in the call. I don't think he's the type to slow play aces or kings here, so I'm really hoping for a low board as I'd wager we're up against at least 1, possibly 2 overs. Come on, dealer, let's see a low board. 1 time, 3, 4, 8, rainbow. Unfortunately, the flop comes ace high, of course. And I just hate it. First, it's very likely that the under the gun player who shoved his small stack looked down, saw an ace, and just went for it. Secondly, I'm up against one of the tighter players at the table who called my 3-bet of 2.5x pre-flop and is in position of me. I check. Under the gun thinks for a while, reaches for chips, and bets out $100. I gotta be honest, guys, I really don't think for too long before folding here. The only turn card that I'm gonna feel good about is a jack. Anything else, and I'll have to fold to any additional pressure that may come on the turn. Under the gun +1 takes the side pot, and the board runs out king of diamonds, 5 of clubs. When the river lands and the dealer asks to see the hands, under the gun +1 proudly shows that he owned my soul with 6-7 of clubs. Wow. Under the gun shows ace-10 off and scoops the main, but I give our buddy his due props for this one.
Hell of a bluff. Good bet.
He got us there with a very dangerous bluff attempt. My check on the flop certainly looked like I didn't have an ace, and he went for it with full reckless abandon. Well done, sir. You win this round. In our next interesting hand, we upgrade from pocket jacks to pocket kings. I opened a 15 from the hijack, and our good friend that we've been battling with all night is on the button. He wants to keep up that theme and 3-bets me to $45. Well, sir, I'm game, and this time I brought more ammo to do battle with. I take a look at his stack and see that he is about 300 behind. I make a 4-bet to $100. Looking back, this is way too small of a size. It should have been at least 120, maybe as large as 150. I'd also have absolutely no issue getting it all in pre with kings. However, in real time, we made it $100 and got a call. The flop comes ace of spades, queen of clubs, 7 of clubs. Well, this isn't great. Another ace-high board plus queens is now ahead of us. However, I do not want to give out any free cards, and we still have a very strong hand. I down bet to $50. Our opponent quickly announces all in. At this point, I'm frustrated. This hand has been off the rails from the very beginning. It's pretty clear to me that I'm behind here, but this guy did put in a big bluff like this earlier, so I want to think about this a little bit before folding. The only hand that really makes sense here, in my mind, are ace-king or ace-queen, which is a very narrow range. But I don't feel good about the situation whatsoever. I review the hand in my head and eventually decide to fold face up. Our opponent returns his cards to the dealer face down, but I ask if he'll tell me his hand when he leaves for the vlog, and he agrees. Later in the evening, after he eventually racks up, I remind him of this. He and I take a walk away from the table and he tells me he had ace-queen suited. That hand actually makes the most sense in this spot, as I don't think a set of aces or a set of queens would shove there when I'm the aggressor. Plus, aces or queens probably would have shipped it in pre-flop. We had some epic battles, this guy and I, and he came out ahead on this day. In our next hand, we look down at ace-queen off in late position. There's a raise to 15 pre-flop from middle position, and I'll be honest, I'm a little distracted talking to my neighbor who's telling me a story about playing poker high in the Midwest in the 70s. Gotta tell ya, this is quite the story and much more interesting than the poker I'm currently playing. I end up making the call here rather than raising. Small blind and big blind also come along. We're 4 ways to a flop in position, and it's a nice one. Queen, 7-7, 2 hearts. It checks to the pre-flop raiser in middle position, who bets out $25. We're almost certainly ahead of whatever he has, but small blind or big blind could easily have a 7 here. So I just call. Small blind folds, but the big blind comes along. The turn comes the 3 of spades. The big blind checks again, and middle position this time bets out $50. I don't think big blind would call the flop with a 7 multi-way like that, and then also check the turn. So I figure he's likely on a draw, or maybe has a medium pocket pair. Middle position, on the other hand, is representing a queen here, but we have the best queen. So I raise it up to 120. Big blind thinks for a while, and folds. Now middle position is in the tank considering his options. We have a bit over $200 left in our stack, and he has slightly less. It's only $70 or more for him to call into about a $300 pot, so he's getting great odds, and I would expect any queen to call here. However, after some thought, middle position folds king-queen face up. I'm somewhat in shock when I see the cards and double check to make sure I didn't misread them. We are getting absolutely owned today, guys. I rake in what should be a much larger pot, but I guess a win is a win, right? In our last interesting hand of the night, I look down at Queen Jack of spades in the small blind. There was a raise from middle position to 15, the cutoff and the button make the call, I make the call, and we're 4 ways to a flop of Queen 8-7, 2 hearts. I feel pretty good about my hand here, but I check first act. It checks to the cutoff, and this guy just sat down at the table a few minutes ago, won a very big hand and doubled up right away. He's played every single hand since he sat down at the table and hasn't had to show down his cards once. I have a feeling he's playing a very wide range. He opens to $50. That is quite a bet in this spot, but pretty similar to what he's done every single hand to this point. We have top pair with an okay kicker and are very likely ahead here. No value hand is betting $50 and expecting a call. I put him on a draw, a small pair, or nothing at all. The button folds, I make the call, and middle position folds. We're heads up to a turn, which in my mind is a pretty good card for me, the 7 of clubs. This reduces the likelihood that we're up against a set and doesn't help any of the draws. I check, and this time he bets out $95. He's continuing the story that he has a big hand here, but I'm not buying it. This card changes nothing really, and if I didn't believe him on the flop, there's no reason to believe him here. I make the call. The river is the king of clubs. Again, I like this card. There aren't a lot of kings that our opponent should have here. Ace-king in late position would have likely 3-bet pre-flop as he was not the original raiser. King-queen is a possibility, but I just don't put him on a queen with that flop bet. Plus we can account for 2 of them, which greatly reduces the likelihood he has a queen. I check. Our opponent bets out $100. Now, I could just call here. I should. just call here. But this guy's been playing so wild. Do we think he ever lays down one pair if I jam? If we don't think he has many kings, we can account for 2 of the queens. It's either pure air, a middle pair, maybe even just ace high, and he's getting way out of line. I'm stuck, I've been bluffed, I've been soul read and had value hands folded against me. I really just want to go for all of it against a wild player in a spot where he may call off light. So, with that in mind, I announce all in. And we get snap called. Oh, great. What did we run into this time? He shows ace 7 of spades. So we had the right read on the flop. This guy was getting way out of line with bottom pair, but got lucky on the turn, hitting a sneaky trips and turning his wild play style into getting the absolute max from me. Gonna be honest, guys, this one hurt. Having the right read on the flop, but still losing a huge hand really sucks. After this hand, I'm not in the state of mind to keep playing, and I make what I believe is the right choice to get up and end the session rather than continue.
Thank you so much for watching. That's it for this one. Rough session. Very rough session. That's certainly the biggest losing session we've had so far today in Vegas. Certainly not a need to shove all in and punt off our stack there. It's just tough sometimes managing when you're in a losing session, you're kind of tilting a little bit and you really just don't believe someone. You have the right read and then just kind of fail to adjust. When that 7 hit on the turn, really blindsided me, didn't think he had it, and was wrong. But it's going to happen like that sometimes. Still very proud of the way I played with some of the earlier hands, folding the pocket kings with the jacks. That was a tough spot, definitely allowed him to bluff me there, and that kind of maybe influenced some of the decisions I made later on in the session. But overall, still think I played pretty well, with the exception of that last hand. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, help me grow this channel to a wider audience. Numbers here for the session. Nothing too spectacular here. In for 600, out for 0. Good luck to all you guys out there. Go run it up, and see you next time.
Ollie, what would you have done? Would you have called that hand with the jacks? Yeah? Wag your tail if you would have called. Oh, you're fearless. Good boy.